All right, first I will give you a little bit of background on how a bill becomes law so that you won't misunderstand where we are with this bill. Okay, so Minnesota's, it's HF 1414, and the Senate file, which is the companion bill it's called, is SF 2065. So they have different bill numbers, but they're identical. So HF 1414 is a mandate for all public and charter schools from pre-K to 12th grade to teach comprehensive sex ed. So it was heard in 2 House committees. The language of, and that was in the House only, the language of HF 1414, after it was heard in those 2 committees, was then inserted into the House Education Omnibus Bill, and the name of that bill is HF 2400. So if you go to the legislative website and you look up HF 1414, it doesn't tell you that it was put into a different bill, HF 2400. An omnibus education bill funds for 2 years all of education on every level for every single thing. It's a mammoth, multi-million-dollar bill. And so there's just this portion was added into that. So there is some confusion for people when they go looking for the bill, and it doesn't show that it passed, and it doesn't show that it was rolled into another bill. So that's a confusion you have to understand. The language that came out of those 2 committees of HF 1414 was identical to what they inserted into the omnibus bill. So on April 23rd, 2019, they were passing the omnibus education bill, and Representative Peggy Bennett introduced an amendment to that bill to delete that language. We call it HF 1414 language, but it isn't identified that way. It's just the language of HF 1414, and she introduced an amendment to remove that language from the bill. And it was controversial. The controversy waged for hours, and then it was passed on almost a party line vote. I'll be saying more about that in just a second. So let's see here. So that was passed, and so then the whole omnibus bill was passed. So HF 2400, when it passed, also passed HF 1414, the language of that. So that's how the bill was passed out of the House of Representatives. Now, all Democrats voted to keep the comprehensive sex ed in, except 2. One of them is Representative Pulowski from Winona. The other is Representative Lilligard from Aurora. Representative Lilligard is a freshman, and he comes from the Iron Range, and it's a conservative area. So he protected himself by voting against it. Representative Pulowski often votes against some of the radical things in education. Not surprising, he voted no. All Republicans who were present voted to remove comprehensive sex education. 3 were absent, they were excused. 1 was Representative Keel from Crookston, Representative McDonald from Watertown, and Representative Poston from Lake Shore. So just to make sure you understand that SF 2065 is the Senate companion bill, and that has identical language to HF 1414. So it was never heard, SF 2065 was never taken up in the Senate. The Senate Education Committee did not hear the bill. So in order to pass, okay, so the question is did HF 1414 pass? It's confusing when we say it passed the House, and people don't understand that that doesn't mean the bill passed into law. So these are the 3 things that have to happen before a bill becomes law. It must pass the House. It did pass the House. It must pass the Senate. It was never heard in the Senate. The language also was not accepted by the Senate in a conference committee of the Education Omnibus Bill. So it did not pass the Senate. And it has to be signed by the governor. It never got through the Senate. It didn't get through conference committee. And so it never got to the governor's desk. HF 1414 did not pass into law. Very important to distinguish that.
And Julie, one of the reasons it did not pass into law is because people spoke up.
Exactly. Exactly. At this point, we were, okay, so we were very active in the House at that time. We were providing information. We gave backup documentation as to why this was what we said it was. And I'm not going to be able to spend an awful lot of time on that right here. But, you know, the controversy was really important. And so when it went into the education omnibus bill, then it had, the Senate also passed an education omnibus bill. And the two had to be reconciled in a conference committee, which is, you know, about 4 or 5 House members, same for Senate. They have to come to an agreement. And so we waged a great battle to make sure that the Senate saw this important enough that they would not accept the omnibus education bill with the House language in it. And that was really important because everything is a bargaining chip in conference committee. We'll give you this if you give us that. If it's real important to the Democrats, they will offer something that the Republicans really want. And so there's trading, there's horse trading that goes on. We had to make this so toxic that no one in the Senate would agree to pass this or to get it out of conference committee. And that happened. And I can credit all the activism of all of us out there.
And then why, Julie, since we defeated it, why are we still talking about it? Why is this still an important issue for us and for parents to be aware of?
Well, okay, so every year, every legislative session is 2 years. That was the first year. This year is the first year of a biennium, and the second year will be 2020 of that biennium. Every bill that was introduced in 2019 is still live until the end of the session in 2020. So it still can be passed through the Senate. It can still go through a conference committee if they insert it into a new bill. They can have an education omnibus bill in 2020 if they want. They can insert the same language in there if they want. And then it would go back to conference committee with the Senate. The Senate could hear it, and then it would also be a vote in the Senate. We do not expect that the Senate will hear the bill individually, but again, it might be waged in conference committee. So the same battle is going to be waged again in 2020. In addition to that, some people will say, oh, the Senate, they'll never let it through. So why worry? Why are we making such a big deal about this? The reason is that if this is not toxic enough, if people, those who voted for this are not held accountable for this, the election in 2020 is going to determine the makeup of the new legislature in 2021. If the Republicans lose control of the Senate in the election of 2020, and the Democrats keep control of the House, this will go through like water through a sieve. This will pass in a heartbeat. And no one will have a chance to even get on board. It's just going to happen so fast. So it has to become something that people are held accountable to. Candidates who are challengers, incumbents, how you voted, everything, people have to be held accountable for this so that there is no future in this passing ever. We want this, we want to bury this and make it so controversial nobody dares touch it. Radioactive. Make sense?
It sure does. And it's important for people to be aware that right now school districts decide what curriculum they are teaching in terms of sex education. And some school districts may already have comprehensive sex ed curriculum in them. And so when people are going to their school board and their superintendent or their principals and asking them about that, I think it's helpful for them to be aware of that, because they might want to inquire what sex ed curriculum the school is using right now. Not only did we get a win in not preventing this bill to pass, but we have an opportunity now to go into the school districts, and in the ones that do have comprehensive sex ed, we can now fight to get that out. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And we know that this is already in school districts. We do not know which school districts exactly. We can guess where they are, but it's up to the local people to, to challenge this in their local, to find out, what are you teaching? And I won't spend a lot of time on that right now, but we can go to our school boards now. We can go to our principals. If this passes, you may not, because it is a mandate at that point from the state. The school boards are out of the picture at that point. That is why it is so important to stop it now, because you can't fight the fight at your local level if this passes into law. And California is dealing with this right now. We heard from Karen England of the Capital Resource Institute in California, who came to our rally, and she made it clear, stop it, because we are facing an absolute nightmare here with the kinds of things that are going through as curriculum in the schools because of the bill that they passed there, just like this one. Okay, I'll go on then. This is the bill. We're starting with Section 1, Sexual Health Education, Subdivision 1, the model program. A, the Commissioner of Education must, in consultation with the Commissioner of Health and other qualified experts, identify one or more model comprehensive sexual health education programs for elementary and secondary schools students. Okay. Elementary, pre-K through 8. Just so you know, it starts at pre-K. So the word comprehensive has specific meaning in health educators, and a lot of people don't know that. What does comprehensive mean? What exactly are we saying here? And we're going to look at a little bit more about that. Basically, it means that everything is given to the students regardless. There are no boundaries. It's no boundaries sex education. And it sexualizes the children, deliberately sexualizes them. The word, so who are these other qualified experts? Okay, the Minnesota Department of Education and the Minnesota Department of Health are, I'm going to try to move, I can't see, there, I can see it. No. Let's see, move this out of the way so I can read what I'm doing here. Okay. The Minnesota Department of Health consider Planned Parenthood, CSE, and Advocates for Youth the experts on CSE. Now we're going to do a little bit down the road with what CSE is. You all know what Planned Parenthood is. Advocates for Youth is another just very radical. They push the most extreme forms of sex education. And those are the people that are referenced by the Department of Education and the Department of Health as the experts. And so you need to know that's who they're going to go through. So what kind of model curriculum will the department create? Okay. So to whom does the Minnesota Department refer young people as a resource for health, for sexual health? So the resources here, you can see Planned Parenthood. That's who they refer people to as the resource. So if that's who they're referring as a resource, you know what they're going to create for a model curriculum. Here, the Department of Health, Advocates for Youth. Again, Advocates for Youth is one of the most extreme organizations promoting sexual health education comprehensive. Here we've got CSE up here, Sexuality Information and Education Council of the U.S. We're going to be dealing more with them. That is who the Department of Health is referring people to. What kind of a model curriculum? Here we go again. This is a quote from the toolkit for gender and transgender and gender nonconforming students that was put together by the Department of Education. So you can see where these people are coming from and what they have already published. You can look to see what kind of thing they will do. So the Department of Education recommends this guide, which they put together, and which was also written by the radical extremists from every level on the transgender issue. They recommend this guide as a resource for schools, educators, students, families, and community members. And here's a quote: "One of the most prevalent misconceptions about gender is that it is based solely on a physical understanding of sex, and that everyone fits into one of two opposite categories, male or female. This misconception, in turn, leads to many incorrectly assume that the body one is born with determines an individual's gender. Gender is better understood as a spectrum." So this is basically the doctrine that Minnesota Department of Education is promoting to the schools around the state, the school board members, the administrators, to the teachers. Going on, sexual orientation describes a person's sexual or romantic attraction, while gender identity refers to someone's own personal sense of being male, female, both, or neither. Everyone has both a gender identity and a sexual orientation. This is the firm belief of the Department of Education, as well as the Department of Health. So here you have a picture of what they are distributing everywhere. You will see this picture up in many schools in our state. If it's good for you to visit the schools sometime, if they'll let you in. Sometimes they don't. But it's good to see what's on the walls. Some of these schools, they'll have these things right on the walls. I won't say that everyone does, because they don't all. This is a genderbread person. By calling it genderbread, you can understand that they're appealing to, the young, the very young. The genderbread person trains teachers and administrators across the state in gender ideology. So there are 4 different ways that you can identify yourself. Your identity, they call it, your gender identity is in your brain. Your sex is down in your genitals. Who you're attracted to is in your heart. And how you express yourself is how you dress and how you act. So you can have who you are is a mix and match of any of those. Talk about confusion. Okay, the Comprehensive Sex Bill, again, we're going to go on. Sexual health education. The commissioner, we're just continuing from where we left off. The commissioner must use the rulemaking process to identify a model program. The commissioner must provide school districts and charter schools with access to the model program, including written materials, curriculum resources, and training for instructors. So some of the objections that people raise to our criticisms, this isn't a curriculum. And they are providing what must be in it, the materials and the resources and the training. It's a curriculum. So what they do when they do this, they are overriding the authority of local school boards and local taxpayers. So local people, the parents, do not have anywhere to go to object to this except to change the law, change the state law, which is a much, much bigger deal than trying to talk to your school board member. People don't feel comfortable going up to the state capitol. They feel much more comfortable talking to their local school board members, who many times you know exactly who they are. Planned Parenthood promotes the bill. They call it a statewide standard for sex education. Here is an example of it. Here's Planned Parenthood's Facebook page. And they are saying here, currently Minnesota has no statewide standard for sex education in schools. So this is what they're promoting, is a statewide standard for sex education in schools. And that's why they are promoting this. Young people have the right, look at these, they misspelled comprehensive, to comprehensive sex ed. And then these are all, just words to confuse you, to act like, oh, this is just a wonderful, benign thing. It's age appropriate, it's medically accurate, it's shame-free, it's culturally competent, and it's honest. We'll look into that a little deeper. Here, support comprehensive sex education in Minnesota. Were they lobbying for this? Well, yes. Yes, they were. In fact, we're convinced they wrote the bill, because this is the way it works in the legislature. Special interest groups write the bills, they bring it to their legislators that are supportive of them, and they say, here's the bill we want you to introduce. Well, it includes them in a lot of different ways. Here it says, Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of comprehensive sex education in Minnesota. Planned Parenthood reaches nearly 50,000 Minnesotans across the lifespan. So here we are again. The commissioner must identify the model program, and who is it that's going to be the experts? Why? They are the largest provider, and they reach Minnesotans all across the state and across the lifespan. So now we move on. Again, under the model program B, the model program must include medically accurate instruction that is age and developmentally appropriate on, number one, human anatomy, reproduction, and sexual development. So, are you kidding me? Medically accurate, a person's gender is based on feelings and not biology. Anal sex, okay, medically accurate. The body's natural immune system is broken down by repeated exposure to sperm during anal and oral intercourse. They push anal sex and oral sex on our kids. It's you don't get pregnant that way. Do they tell these kids that? No, they just want it done safely. So they teach them how to do it with condoms of one sort or another. They are recommending condoms for oral and anal sex. These have never been FDA approved, and they are not, they're not reliable. They aren't telling the kids this. So to call it medically accurate is just a sham, and it's just a terrible sham. They use these words freely, and they're not true. They just aren't true. This isn't medically accurate. Look at dental dams for safer oral sex. Oral sex is great. Just use dental dams. Can be used as a barrier between a person's mouth and their partner's genitals, vulva, vagina, anus. The person holds the dental dam between their mouth and their partner's genitals. I hate to be saying this, by the way. It reduces the risk for HIV and STI. Really, be ready, be real, smart sexuality education. That's comprehensive sex ed. That's medically accurate? I don't think so. It's perfectly normal. Sexual intercourse. Having sex can involve the penis and the vagina, or the mouth and the genitals, or the penis and the anus. It's perfectly normal. It's for 10-year-olds, for age 10 and up. That's 4th grade. We put this on here that it says, we put the caution. We put this warning. According to Minnesota Statute 617.241, pictures in this book may violate obscenity laws. Therefore, we have blurred the pictures. Now, they can do it without any caution, violating the law, because Minnesota law exempts schools from the obscenity laws. That's a fact. Now, they're treating this, as you can see, as perfectly normal. Moving on, age appropriate on human anatomy, reproduction, and sexual development. It's perfectly normal as recommended for 10-year-olds. Anal oral sex, they teach them how to masturbate. They sexualize them. They tell them what climax feels like and how to make it work for them. Yeah. Here are some pictures. We've blurred it, they haven't. Notice down here it says a yes vote on it. This goes back to 2014 when we were cautioning the legislature that passing the bullying bill was a way to bring this in to the schools. It was just a strategy to bring this book into the schools, and that's because the way they defined bullying was to teach everybody everything about the perversion, and so nobody would be bullied because you normalize it, so you can't be bullied by it. That was their narrative, which is bizarre. Moving on. The model program includes medically accurate instruction that is age and development appropriate on consent, bodily autonomy. Okay, let's go to consent. Consent is used in this section. This is their definition down below. Consent as used in this section means affirmative, conscious, and voluntary agreement to engage in interpersonal physical or sexual activity, okay? They are being taught to consent to being sexually active, as if sexual activity for kids is normal, acceptable, and positive. They're sexualizing their kids. Bodily autonomy. Bodily autonomy refers to the right to abortion. If you just put it on, go on the internet, do a search for bodily autonomy, that's primarily, not only, but primarily what you're going to come up with. The abortion rights people are driving abortion rights as a bodily autonomy issue. And so the advocates of this will say that there's no reference to abortion in HF 1414. It has nothing to do with the abortion issue. This language requires the schools to teach abortion rights. So, I mean, every pro-life organization in the state should be on this really strong, because this teaching of bodily autonomy is about abortion rights. But it also refers to young people's right to be sexually active, and that's a really big deal because it is being pushed very aggressively. It is actually one of the foundations of comprehensive sex education, young people's right to be sexually active. International Planned Parenthood Federation, IPPF, they put out some years ago a document called Exclaim, Young People's Guide to Sexual Rights, an IPPF declaration. That's their cover picture. They say, quote, autonomy to make decisions about one's sexuality in line with the evolving capacity of young people and without forceful interference from parents, guardians, or other adult figures. This is the removal of parental involvement or special or spousal consent laws that prevent young people from seeking sexual and reproductive health services. So that's what they're promoting, removal of parental involvement. That's right out of this document. Recognition, protection, and fulfillment of young people's legal rights at all times, no matter their age. What does this right entitle young people to? It's the right to be sexually active without parental involvement, no matter their age. And people are more and more saying what comprehensive sex ed is grooming for pedophilia. Sexual pleasure is a human right recognized by international UN agreements. This is their document, Relevant Human Rights Agreements for Sexual Rights. That comes right out of their thing. And this is a quote, sexuality and sexual pleasure are important parts of being human for everyone, no matter what age, no matter if you're married or not, and no matter if you want to have children or not. That's right from page 37. And they, at one point, they list all of the international agreements at the UN that would protect human rights, and this is one of them. So, I mean, there are lists in there of all the human rights agreements between different countries. Here it is again, sexual pleasure is a human right. And here they go to tell us that some cultural and traditional beliefs threaten people's sexual rights. And young people are especially vulnerable to sexual rights violations. So, cultural and traditional beliefs. Okay, that's our basic principles of good living, right living, moral living. That is a threat to their sexual rights.